Call of the Cryptids is yet another horror adventure game on Roblox. You get in a lobby with all your friends and see if you can survive, but be careful because if you die, you can't come back. Oh, so scary. So, usually what I've been looking for in Roblox a lot lately are new games to play. I kind of just casually search for random games to play to pass the time nowadays. Now, a pretty recurring issue with Roblox that I've noticed myself is that the vast majority of games that I come across just do not cater to me. I don't know if it's the game space changing as a whole, or just the fact that players on the older side shouldn't be looking at Roblox for unironic entertainment. Maybe I'm just getting old, I don't know. I've kind of started to notice that most of them really cater towards a younger audience, which makes sense because it's Roblox, and because of this, they're all really simple and toned down because kids are stupid. So, because of this lately, I found myself wanting a new game that was a little bit more complex. I was so fed up with every horror game being the same, every simulator game being the same, and that's kind of how I found myself playing Call of the Cryptids.
What is... No!
When you've been desperately searching on the front page for any games that'll interest you, you're literally just looking for anything that can be seen as remotely eye-catching. There could be a literal abomination of a game, but I'll still click on it as long as it has a good icon. And this game proves it. Alright, so there's 2 chapters so far in this game, and as weird as it sounds, you probably shouldn't play Chapter 1 first. I played the game around when it first came out, and honestly, Chapter 1 did not leave a very good first impression. Also, Chapter 2 is supposed to be a prequel anyway, so you can just play the game chronologically, I guess. Regardless, Chapter 1 and 2 don't even connect that much anyways. Like, they're basically the equivalent of the Cloverfield paradox, but in Roblox. Anyways, Chapter 1 starts out with this little mini cutscene introduction, giving high expectations that of which the game will only fail to live up to later. You and your crew are stranded in the middle of nowhere because your bus crashed, but luckily for you, the town's local sheriff just so happens to reside in the middle of nowhere as well. Also, he's dead, so you can take his car and shit and use it to escape. I do enjoy how the first part of Chapter 1 establishes the setting and the initial threat. If you listen closely off in the distance, you can hear the faint sounds of Siren Head, which I think is a really nice touch. In order to repair the sheriff's car, you're going to need at least like 5 items, and one of which is a crowbar that allows you to gain access to the house. These items are highlighted with a little sparkle effect, which will appear even on low graphic settings. If we're being honest, this level is not really something that the majority of people will get on their first try, or their second try for that matter. Even with the sparkly highlight, these items are still hard to find, as they still blend into the tall grass and the color scheme of the overall setting. A helpful tip, however, is just turning down your graphics to 1, and the tall grass will just go away. When you use the crowbar to get inside the house, you'll see that there isn't any actual car parts in there, but rather a bunch of lore, or rather just stuff that kind of hints at shit that will come up later. Like an ominous picture of a giant figure moving in the distance, or a book describing the god of roadkill. Besides this, you can interact with a lot of things in the house, which is a nice sign of effort put in by the game devs. When you finish gathering everything for the car, you can just repair the car. When you do this, the car will give 15 seconds for everybody to get into it before it abruptly leaves. This is kind of bullshit, considering that 15 seconds is just barely enough for everybody to haul ass back to the vehicle, especially if they're in the house or the basement. I remember way back when the chapter first released, my friends and I had to redo this part because 3 out of 4 of us got left behind when the car left, and to this day, this issue still isn't fixed. Also, it's worth noting that you only have 10 minutes to start the car. The clock immediately starts as soon as you get out of the opening cutscene, with little explanation for why you're in such a rush. Practically speaking, what's stopping you from spending the night at the sheriff's house and repairing the car in the morning? It really isn't explained all that much. I initially thought that this timer was to imply that the monstrous noises that you heard in the distance were slowly getting closer, and that failing to repair the car ASAP would result in Siren Head coming out of the woods to kill you all. But it's not, or at least it's supposed to be that way. But it's not. Failure to repair the car within 10 minutes results in the screen being tinted red, somber music playing, and then getting sent back to the lobby. This confused me when it happened to me, because it really just made no sense to me. By looking at the stuff in the Discord server, apparently Siren Head is supposed to spawn in to kill you, but I guess it just broke a while ago and they never bothered fixing it. Doesn't really surprise me considering the fact that they never tweaked the car's abrupt departure. When you repair the car, everybody inside of it will be taken to a location known as Seven Devils, which is the prominent setting of both of the chapters. It's an abandoned, remote, rural town with a supposedly dark history. You stop the car and get outside for some reason, and then you're prompted to fix a generator. This is the main part of the game, which is funny because it's also the worst part of the game. You have to go running around the entire town searching for parts to fix a generator, which is actually the worst, by the way. Not only is the town pretty big, there's also countless cryptids crawling around. This is also one of those games where they try to make everything super dark, which is stupid in the case of this game because it makes navigating all the worse. You do get a map, but you don't get a compass, and it's hard to look for landmarks because of how dark the map is. Now, the darkness is already a nuisance and a half, but throw in the monsters, and this is where the game starts to get extremely unfair. The majority of the monsters in Cult of the Cryptids are faster than you, and will more than always kill you in about 1 to 3 hits. They also have the shit ton of HP. The game gives you like 3 guns that you can pick up, and here's where I should probably tell you that if you die in this game, you lose everything in your inventory. Unless it was bought with the Game Pass. So your chances of killing these monsters are pretty slim, to say the least. Also, losing everything in your inventory upon death makes the game almost unbeatable at times. Because if you die with a generator part in your inventory, it's not going to respawn. Ending 1 is the ending that you're supposed to get, but it feels like the game is beating the shit out of you for trying to get it. Ending 3 is easily accessible, so long as you spent your Robux in the gun game passes. It's almost like the game is purposely trying to get you to give it money so that you can win. I mean, it worked on me, so... Anyways, ending 1 is the ending where you repair the generator, but ending 3 is the one that you're more likely to get. If you kill Siren Head, the game will be like, oh my god, you killed Siren Head, it's safe to leave now. Which basically implies that Siren Head was what was keeping you here this whole time. Yes, I did Google it, and apparently Siren Head can catch up to a speeding car, but this whole thing still implies that the countless other monsters aren't also a formidable threat? I'd imagine at least Cartoon Cat would be a problem. Besides the gameplay aspect being absolutely horrid, the story, or lore, is pretty disappointing as well. There isn't much of the plot to the game really, and the lore behind the town seems pretty unrevealing at all. The game uses the setting of the town as more of an aesthetic rather than a foil to tell the story. The Cult of the Cryptids doesn't even seem to have any importance at all in Chapter 1. You can encounter a cult member, but this is solely for the purpose of getting ending 5, it seems. I never came across him once. The game makes it seem like the town has a story behind it, but it gives such vague hints that go absolutely nowhere. You don't have to explain how the town got abandoned or why the monsters are roaming around, but you should explain that in a later chapter. But you should at least give us a little bit of lore to set up the story that you can build upon later. Like, for example, I found it kind of interesting how there's a mall in such an odd spot by the highway. Apparently the mall was built on the opposite side of the highway after Seven Devils was abandoned. That's good, that has potential, but the game never builds on it at all. The cryptids aren't even that unique in the game either, and the majority of them don't even have any real connection to the plot or anything.
What is that?
Siren Head serves a purpose in the game's plot by preventing you from leaving Seven Devils right away, but where do the other cryptids come and play? They don't. The game is jam-filled with all these cryptids, but their main purpose seems to be the name recognition. Basically, Cult of the Cryptids is your modern-day equivalent of those Survive the Killers in Area 51 in that aspect. To be honest, I believe the only creature besides Siren Head that seems to serve a real purpose in the plot is the God of Roadkill, which is a theory more than anything. I did do a little bit of research on the creatures in this game before making this video, and apparently, the God of Roadkill is like the Grim Reaper for animals that got ran over. He also causes the people who ran over these animals to die in car crashes, which I assume is how the sheriff died at the start of the game. I mean, the car parts are pretty widely scattered, and there is a book in the house that references the God of Roadkill, so it's not exactly a far-reaching theory in my opinion. Anyhow, pretty much all of the other monsters are just things that chase you. They just look different and make different noises. Cartoon Cat is a little bit different because he follows you around and does little waves and does little animations, and I guess that the Weeping Angel type statues are also pretty unique, but that's about it really. Basically, to sum things up for Chapter 1, things can definitely be improved. At the very least, I think that we can all agree that we shouldn't lose our inventories when we die, or the items should at least respawn after we die. I also believe that a compass should be added, as this would make the game a lot easier altogether. A compass wouldn't be necessarily game-breaking, but it would make the game feel a lot less tedious altogether. I feel like 90% of Chapter 1 is literally just wandering around in the darkness, so the game would be so much more bearable if we could navigate easier. Also, I know that you're trying to make money here, but you don't have to make it so hard on the people who don't want to buy the Game Pass for your game. People will buy the Game Passes out of respect for your game. If your game is coming across as a pay-to-win game, in the way that ending 3 is extremely hard to achieve without buying Game Passes, then they probably will just leave the game and never come back to it. Basically, just make it easier for the free-to-play people, alright? Alright, so Chapter 2 is called Origin. It came out kind of recently, and it serves as a prequel to Chapter 1. Chapter 2 is a pretty solid improvement over the original, but it still has its fair share of issues that we can get into. I think the first one that comes to mind for a lot of people is that the Game Passes that you bought from Chapter 1 don't actually transfer over to Chapter 2, despite it literally being the same game. I think that this is just really unnecessary, and it's clear what they were trying to do here. It really doesn't come off as player/consumer friendly, and I don't really think that they even had a good cover-up excuse for it. I mean, yeah, in certain cases you can say like, oh, the AK-47 Game Pass can only work in Chapter 1 because Chapter 2 takes place in a time before the AK existed. then why don't you just reskin it or give us a browning or something, you know? The creator has not really given a clear answer or even a half-decent excuse for why the game passes don't transfer, but he has absolutely no problem deflecting when people confront him about it. Obviously, yeah, I know, dealing with complaints is super annoying, but when you factor in how much that these game passes cost, you kind of start to sympathize with the people here. You asked for criticism. People are giving it to you. Don't be an asshole about it. I mean, the closest thing to an excuse that you gave for why the game passes didn't transfer is because, well, technically, the games are two different start places. Therefore, they're two separate games, so get fucked. It's a tiny bit insulting to people who have spent so much money supporting your game, especially when you said yourself that all existing game passes from Chapter 1 that would fit into Chapter 2 would transfer over. Anyways, so Chapter 2 starts out in the asylum, which is one of the few main connections to Chapter 1 seen here. You escape the asylum, it's all snowy and stuff, then you need to start a fire next to a Jeep to warm up the Jeep. Then, the Jeep's engine will warm up and it will take off. If you don't get into the Jeep before time runs out, you die of frostbite. It leaves you behind. Great. After that, you pull up to an abandoned camp and you have to gather a bunch of wood to start the fire. And there's this cave nearby, but it's not really a cave because it has a f***ing door. After gathering like 3 or 4 logs, a bunch of cultists come out of the door and you have to defend yourself. I found this part really interesting because meleeing them will instantly kill them, but shooting them won't. Alright. So after that, you have to make your way through the door that the cult members came out of, and there's actually a maze you have to go through with Cartoon Cat trying to find and kill you. If you die in this game, it's exactly like the first one where you lose all your inventory items, so if Cartoon Cat kills you, then you don't have your flashlight anymore, and you have to use some shitty candles instead. Oh yeah, by the way, the candles blow out if you run with them. Alright, so after you get out of the maze, you head outside and it's daytime again. I guess that you spent all night in Cartoon Cat's maze or something? I don't know. There's this unfinished bridge and you have to use a gargoyle statue to get across it. Also, there's a giant monster underneath it that's meant to spook you. And there's also a giant monster in the distance that I thought was a pretty nice touch, actually. So good job. After making your way across the bridge, you go inside this elevator that takes you to the final part of the game, or the main part of the game, you know, the third act. There's also the guy on the TV who calls himself the creator, and he's the big bad main antagonist of Chapter 2. Oh no. Yeah, so you'll probably notice how flat that my summary of Chapter 2 was, and that's kind of because Chapter 2 is just flat altogether, in my opinion. For a game that's so adamant on having a story and lore, the actual plot of Chapter 2 is extremely flat. There's literally just a bunch of randomly, loosely connected segments that aren't even explained how they're significant to each other. I mean, come on, the transition from the frozen outdoors to Cartoon Cat's maze, then back outside during a sunrise/sunset, it's totally disjointed. I feel like when the devs were making Chapter 2, they were just checking off a list of things that they wanted to add in the game, without really caring about how they could actually incorporate them at all. Oh yeah, I want to add Cartoon Cat, and a mime thing, and the creator, and a giant octopus monster thing, and Siren Head. It doesn't matter how these things get into the game, as long as they are into the game, it's fine with them, apparently. Seriously, Siren Head and Cartoon Cat don't even have to be in Chapter 2. They don't serve a purpose at all. In fact, they even added a skip to the start of the game where you can literally jump right from the asylum to the final stage of the game, so you don't even have to deal with Cartoon Cat or the octopus monster. Along with this, the creator is supposed to be central to the plot of Chapter 2, but he doesn't feel like it at all. He isn't introduced until the very end of the chapter, and he doesn't seem to be responsible for any other events leading up to this point. When you come across the creator, he's like, I captured the sheriff at my studio, and also, there's a bunch of scary shit outside now, mwahaha. So then you have to head to Mime Picture Studios and interact with this audio thing on the floor. The TV says, yeah, I'm waiting outside for you, teehee. And there's like this little paper here that explains that the creator or whatever is inside the mime suit. Like his skin and stuff has fused and become one with the suit, and in order to leave his new life of being a mime or whatever, he just has to unwind the key. When you leave the building, he's like right there, but he can't fit underneath the awning or whatever because he's too tall, and then you can just unwind the key on his back and it'll kill him. Also, it takes so many fucking clicks just to kill him. In my opinion, it should only take 3, because I feel as if this step is just really, really needlessly tedious. Anyhow, when you kill the mime, the sheriff's car immediately becomes available as an escape. You only have 60 seconds to get inside of it, so basically, everybody who's far out on the other side of the map is basically f***ed. The sheriff is never seen in this chapter, by the way. Like, what happened to him? Was he just waiting in the car for us to kill the mime? How did he die in Chapter 1? Why did the mime capture the sheriff? Things like this just aren't explained. Anyways, so what I gathered from that chapter is that the mime wasn't actually killed. It was just like, when you turned the key, you made him turn back to normal. And he turned out to be the cult leader in Chapter 1. Just my theory. Also, guns are pointless in Chapter 2. Don't buy them, especially if you don't believe the whole Game Pass situation was fair in the first place. Don't support that kind of marketing. Alright, so in conclusion, Cult of the Cryptids is kind of a hot mess. Chapter 1 is a wreck. You can't play it casually, and you can't play it seriously without sweating really hard. Chapter 2 is an improvement over Chapter 1, but then again, the bar wasn't set very high to begin with. I hope that the game takes some of their community suggestions into consideration, because I think that the game would really benefit from it. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you liked the video, subscribe, I guess. If you want to check it out, links in description. Join my Discord. Bye. Love you.